November 10, 1975. A 729-foot freighter, the pride of the Great Lakes, vanishes without a trace. 29 men on board, all gone. No distress call, no bodies, nothing. For days, rescue crews searched the icy waters of Lake Superior, but the lake gave nothing back. And here's the part that has haunted people for nearly 50 years. Usually, drowned victims resurface. But in this case, not one did. Why? The answer wasn't just tragic, it was disturbing. What divers finally discovered, decades later, shocked everyone who saw it. And it left families with a choice no one ever wants to make. Alright, let's go back to June 1958. Picture this, the largest ship ever built for the Great Lakes is about to launch. The Edmund Fitzgerald, all 729 feet of her, sliding into the water for the first time. This wasn't just any cargo ship, you know? This was the crown jewel of the Great Lakes shipping fleet. Now here's the thing about the Fitzgerald, she was built to haul taconite pellets. Basically, iron ore that's been processed into these little marble-sized balls. Not exactly glamorous cargo, but it was the lifeblood of American steel production. Every trip, she'd load up in Minnesota and make the journey to Detroit or Toledo, carrying enough iron ore to build skyscrapers. For 17 years, the Fitzgerald did this run like clockwork. She was reliable, she was fast, and honestly, she was kind of famous among Great Lakes sailors. People would stop what they were doing just to watch her pass by. But you know what made the Fitzgerald really special? Her captain, Ernest McSorley. This guy had been sailing the Great Lakes for over 40 years. 40 years! He knew every inch of those waters, every weather pattern, every dangerous spot. McSorley was planning to retire soon, and this November run in 1975, well, it was supposed to be one of his last. No one knew that this voyage would actually be his last. And the lake he knew so well, the lake that had been his life, would become his grave. So November 10th, 1975 starts out pretty normal. The Fitzgerald loads up with over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets and heads out from Superior, Wisconsin. The weather's not great, but nothing McSorley hasn't handled 100 times before. He's got another ship traveling with him, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, and they're staying in radio contact. Now, sailors on the Great Lakes have this saying, the witches of November. It's what they call the brutal storms that hit the lakes every fall. And let me tell you, this particular witch was about to show her teeth. As the day goes on, the weather gets worse. I'm talking hurricane-force winds, waves building to over 30 feet. That's like a 3-story building of water coming at you, over and over again. The Anderson's captain, Jesse Cooper, is watching his radar and he can see the Fitzgerald struggling ahead of him. Around 3:30 p.m., McSorley radios the Anderson. His voice is calm, professional, but there's something underneath it. He tells them the Fitzgerald has developed a bad list, meaning she's leaning to one side. Both of his radars are down. But then he says something that still gives me chills, we're holding our own. Those were the last words anyone ever heard from Ernest McSorley. At 7:10 p.m., Captain Cooper looks at his radar screen. The blip that had been the Edmund Fitzgerald for the entire journey, that steady presence that had been there all day, just disappears. Gone. No mayday call, no distress signal, nothing. When the search and rescue teams finally made it out there, what they found was absolutely chilling. But what they didn't find, well, that was even worse. The next morning, November 11th, the Coast Guard launches one of the most intensive search operations in Great Lakes history. They've got planes in the air, boats fighting through the aftermath of the storm, and the Anderson is still out there searching alongside them. And they do find things. Pieces of the Fitzgerald scattered across miles of Lake Superior. Life rafts that had been ripped apart like tissue paper. Life jackets floating empty. A fuel slick spreading across the water. All the evidence you'd expect from a ship that had just been destroyed by one of the most violent storms in Great Lakes history. But here's what they didn't find, bodies. Not one. not a single crew member from the Edmund Fitzgerald ever surfaced. Now, this might not sound that weird to you, but here's the thing about drowning victims: they almost always surface eventually. It's basic biology. After a few days, gases build up in the body and it floats back to the surface. It's grim, but it's predictable. Families, as horrible as it sounds, they usually get closure. They get to bury their loved ones. But Lake Superior, she's different. The water temperature that day was maybe 36 degrees. That's cold enough to kill you in minutes, but more importantly, it's cold enough to change everything about what happens after death. So yeah, 29 men vanished without a trace. 29 families left wondering, hoping, praying that maybe somehow their husband, their father, their son had made it to shore somewhere. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The lake had claimed them, and she wasn't giving them back. 3 days after the sinking, a Navy sonar team finally locates the Fitzgerald. She's sitting on the bottom of Lake Superior, 17 miles northwest of Whitefish Bay, in 530 feet of water. And when they get that first sonar image back, it's immediately clear what happened. The ship is broken in 2 massive pieces. The bow section is sitting upright, like she's still trying to push forward through the water. But the stern, that's rolled over onto its side. The break between the 2 sections is it's devastating. Whatever force hit the Edmund Fitzgerald was so powerful it literally snapped a 729-foot steel ship in half. In 1976, they send down some of the first underwater robots to get a closer look. The footage that comes back is haunting. Twisted steel, debris scattered everywhere, the ship's bell still hanging there in the darkness. But what the robots don't find is any sign of the crew. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? The ship is found, the families have some answers about what happened, and the Edmund Fitzgerald becomes another tragic chapter in Great Lakes maritime history. But almost 20 years later, Lake Superior revealed something that no one was prepared to see. 1994, Dr. Joseph McInnes, a renowned underwater explorer, teams up with filmmaker Fred Shannon for an expedition to the Edmund Fitzgerald. They've got better technology now, better cameras, and they want to document the wreck like never before. What they discovered down there changed everything. The frigid water of Lake Superior, that water that stays just above freezing even in summer, had done something incredible and disturbing. It had preserved the crew. After nearly 20 years, the bodies of the Edmund Fitzgerald's crew were still there, still at their posts, still wearing their coveralls and life jackets. McInnes later described seeing at least one crew member lying face down in the mud near the bow section, perfectly preserved by the cold water. The life jacket was still strapped on, the coveralls still intact. It was like looking at someone who had just fallen asleep, except they'd been sleeping for 2 decades. The footage from this dive eventually made it into a 1995 documentary, and when it aired, all hell broke loose. The families of the crew members were outraged, and honestly, who could blame them? These weren't just images of a shipwreck anymore. These were pictures of their loved ones' graves, broadcast on television without their permission. From that moment on, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald wasn't just a maritime mystery. It was declared sacred ground. After the controversy from the 1995 documentary, the families, maritime historians, and government authorities came together to make a decision. The bodies of the Edmund Fitzgerald crew would never be recovered. The wreck site would remain their final resting place. In 1995, the only thing brought up from the wreck was the ship's bronze bell. But they didn't just take it, they replaced it with a memorial bell engraved with the names of all 29 crew members. It was a way to honor the dead without disturbing them. Then in 1997, new laws were passed making it illegal to photograph human remains at shipwreck sites without family consent. And in 2006, Ontario went even further, officially declaring the Edmund Fitzgerald an underwater grave. Anyone caught trespassing on the site now faces fines of up to $1 million. The message was clear: these men had suffered enough. They deserved to rest in peace. So why didn't the bodies ever surface? Why did Lake Superior keep them when other bodies of water give their victims back? It all comes down to that bone-chilling water temperature. Lake Superior never gets warm, even in the middle of summer. The deepest parts stay just above freezing. When someone drowns in normal water temperatures, bacteria starts breaking down the body, creating gases that make it float back to the surface. But in Lake Superior's icy depths, that bacterial process basically stops. The cold water acts like a massive refrigerator, preserving everything exactly as it was. The bodies don't decompose the way they would in warmer water, so they don't create the gases needed to resurface. It's nature's way of creating a perfect, terrible tomb. The men of the Edmund Fitzgerald remain where they fell, preserved in the cold, silent depths of Lake Superior. The lake that sailors say never gives up or dead still keeps them together forever. Captain McSorley, who knew those waters better than his own backyard, who had sailed them safely for 4 decades, rests now in the wheelhouse of his ship. His crew, men who trusted him with their lives, remain at their posts in the darkness below. And honestly, maybe that's how it should be. Maybe some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries. Maybe some graves are meant to stay undisturbed. The Edmund Fitzgerald sank on November 10, 1975. But in a way, she's still sailing, still carrying her crew through the eternal darkness of Lake Superior's depths. And the lake that claimed them, that cold, merciless lake, has become their eternal guardian. The next time you see Lake Superior on a calm, beautiful day, remember that beneath that peaceful surface lies one of the most perfectly preserved maritime tragedies in history. 29 men who went to work one November morning and never came home. 29 families who had to learn to live with questions that will never be answered. The bodies of the Edmund Fitzgerald were never recovered because sometimes, nature decides that some things are too sacred to disturb. And sometimes, the most respectful thing we can do is simply remember. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into maritime mysteries. And let me know in the comments, do you think the decision to leave the crew undisturbed was the right one? Until next time, remember that the Great Lakes might look peaceful, but they hold secrets that run deeper than we can imagine.